I'd just like to thank everyone for coming to the gallery today. So we're here with Ted Fullerton, who's going to be talking a bit about his background as an artist, the exhibition that we have in front of us, Born in the Year of the Snake, and then a bit about his imagery, iconography. Since it is so laden with information, it's great to have him to talk a bit about it. And this is part of the Canadian Art Hop Weekend, which we're inviting everyone to go check out galleries, not just ours, but in the area we've got a lot of great locations. So thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Maybe you could start us off a bit about you. Your background, your sort of, how you became an artist and how that sort of led up to what you're doing today.
Yeah, how I became an artist. It's interesting as a question because I get asked that quite often. It's one of those things, I don't think I found it, it found me. And ever since I was very, very young, I had an incredible gratification of expressing myself. And I was also very fortunate all the way through public school, middle school, high school, that I had teachers that encouraged that and applauded what accomplishments I was making. Certainly in high school, Jim Pollard, a teacher, was very influential and encouraged me to go to the Ontario College of Art, which I did in the mid-70s.
The OCA?
Yep, OCA, yeah. What amazed me when I got there, it was like an awakening for me. I think there's a Mark Twain quote that I really, really love, and it has to do the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you know why. And when I was at OCA, that purpose became very relevant and important, and I realized it at that point. But to be around the breadth of creative individuals and the diversity of what they were expressing was a real eye-opener for me. I was introduced to a studio in my first year at the Ontario College of Art and Design. Well, it wasn't that, it was just OCA at that time. And that was printmaking, where I met an instructor who became my mentor, Frederick Hagan, whose estate is also represented by the gallery. Fred and I became good friends, and I consider him my mentor. We became good friends certainly after I graduated, and we went on canoe trips together, saw exhibitions together. But his breadth of appreciation for the diversity of art practices was really quite wonderful, and drew that diversity up into the printmaking area. And I think probably one of the reasons why I believe I have an appreciation for the breadth of what's happening within the visual arts as a result of being in that space, working with other students with different interests aesthetically and with Fred. I was quite lucky. In my second year, there was a call, a national call for contemporary printmaking, a juried exhibition for that was going to tour nationally. I was in my second year, and I got into that exhibition. And I also very fortunate in my fourth year being represented by a gallery for solo show. So it kind of perpetuated itself from there.
Yeah, and you and Frederick actually had an exhibition with each other at later in your career.
That's right. Fred had passed at that point, but the estate was very enthusiastic of both of us having an exhibition together because the family knew how close Fred and I were in friendship. It
must have been particularly satisfying to see, after meeting him so early in those formative years, to having that sort of pinnacle, I guess, showing with your mentor. And so, like, from early on, was your work always image laden? Was it always, steeped in psychology, sociology? Like, was that always a direction your work took, or was it something that you noticed came out as later?
It was always there. And if I was to explain my artistic practice, it's figurative and it's symbolic. Figurative in that I'm interested in humanist perspectives, a collective identity, a collective knowledge, an acquired knowledge, and with regard to the symbolic inference, pursuing the idea of metaphor, myth, allegory was all an aspect of what interests me. And with regard to symbolic references, the best way I can explain that is in poetry, words take on meaning beyond their initial intent. In my work, images take on meaning beyond their initial intent. They're not direct narratives. They're intended, hopefully, that stimulate some kind of essence within a person, and then the interpretation starts from there.
Well, I think that's a good segue into the exhibition. And maybe you can give us sort of like a brief synopsis of what the exhibition is to you.
Yeah, the exhibition, Born in Year of the Snake, I've also received a number of emails. What's with the title, right? And I think we all know that the Chinese zodiac is currently the Year of the Snake. That's what we're in right now. Within my work, I've always been interested in introducing the serpent within my work, not the way it's been demonized, but as a creative life force. The snake swallowing its tail, indicating a cycle, the shedding of its skin and renewal. It's used with regard to health and healing, the umbilical between the mystical and the earth experience. So that is my interest in utilizing the serpent, and I prefer to use the word serpent as opposed to snake, because snake, a snake in the grass, snake oil, etc., it has a negative connotation to it. So with regard to that, the title, the serpent is something that's been within my work. And also I was born in the Year of the Snake.
Yeah.
So, but the work comprising the exhibition is a bit different from what has transpired in the past. I usually work in different movements of work within music. That's almost like a different chapter altogether.
Yeah.
But I also do things that interest me at the time and at the moment. And the exhibition here is comprised of all three of those works that have just kind of, I'm interested in doing, something's come to mind, I explore it. And the other is from a movement of work called A Path of Least Resistance, and the 7 Teachings of the Grandparents. Not all of those paintings are included. The Path of Least Resistance comprises 10 paintings, all of which just have a number, and they're sequential with regard to how they've been done. And that came about, we have a place up north, and it's totally off the grid. You have to get there by boat. And it's a wonderful place to be for all of those reasons and more. I have an open studio, which is a large space screened all the way around, which I work every summer on drawings.
That's lovely.
Yeah, and so with regard to that space, the main building is heated with a wood stove. So we go out and look for felled trees. We don't cut trees down for firewood, but look for felled trees, and we cut them, and then we lug them back and stack them whenever we need to do that. And what interested me in that process was as I was walking with this load to get to my objective, the path of least resistance through the woods was what I was trying to take, right? Yeah. So having thought about that, I decided to go out and walk into the woods. Again, this is untouched wood, wooded area, right? And take the path that wasn't of least resistance. And I found that the experience physically, emotionally, and visually was considerably more rewarding than just getting to the goal and then finishing, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, so the paintings are from that movement that are here. And the other is from the 7 Teaching of the Grandparents. I was honored to have been invited by an Anishinaabe elder, Dujunge, who he would say his government name is Paul Schilling, along with 2 other artists. Julie, who is here, it was one of the artists as well, and Xavier was also. So the 4 of us represent the 4 directions of the healing wheel, and we interpreted the 7 teachings of the grandparents, and they were shown separately, and we discussed them and gave insight into those at 7 different cultural events.
Yep.
And was extremely pleased that all of the works were being shown at Laurier University on September the 30th, the Day of Reconciliation, Orange Shirt Day.
Yep.
At the completion of that. So 3 of those works were selected to go into this exhibition as well.
The 3 that are right behind us.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. And then you said there was a third, sort of the work that you're doing that's spontaneous, like in the moment.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I don't know where ideas come from. They just arrive, right? And they're haunting until you release them, right?
It's an interesting word to choose, haunting. Is there a reason why?
I'm sorry, what was that?
It's an interesting word to choose, that they're haunting.
Yes. It's going to sound weird, but it's almost like an exorcism, right? You know, they're in you, you're thinking about them, you're considering them, and they're just there. And until you remove them, you can't move on to what else is next, right? Yeah.
No, I think this is good because, as you said, like with the word snake, you know, there's a negative connotation, there's a positive, and I think when people think about words like haunting, there's potentially a negative connotation. So I think it's nice to hear you explain that. Yeah. Sort of how you view ideas.
Yeah, and I'm interested in the reconciliation of opposites, of images that have sort of a dualistic perspective on things.
Yeah.
Right? So just coming back to that comment with regard to making art, it's something that needs to get out. It has to get out, and when it is, you're almost liberated to move forward.
Right. Would this gentleman behind us be a sort of idea of that?
This particular work is called. What's it called? Germinate. I'm forgetting the names of my children. You know, Germinate Green Man.
Yep.
Thank you.
No,
maybe you should explain it.
No. That's why you're here.
So this work was actually done about this time last year.
Yeah.
And it was an open invitation from the City of Barrie, the Cultural Department, across Canada. They wanted to do a temporary installation of artwork that dealt with the theme Seeds to Sow. Okay. And with that, having read that, the idea of germinate came to mind, and I have worked with the allegory of Green Man for quite a while. It's a myth that exists in almost every culture, and it has to do with renewal, spring, new possibilities associated with the male, which has essentially been historically a destructive force. So I've been interested in that as an idea in light of the new male, a positive, creative, empathetic persona. Force. So this work was done and installed and was there for I think about 2.5 months, and then it was returned to each artist's work was returned.
I have to ask, I'd be remiss if I didn't. We get a lot of questions about when people see the sculptures, they always wonder, well, what is it made of? Oh, how does he make it? It looks like bronze, but it's not. And then you show them how light it is. Like,
I'm going to speak to that. The one thing I forgot to mention about this piece is that I wanted the piece to look like it was pushing itself out of the ground, and then the foliage, of course, insinuates that a new beginning. Yes. But the work is cold cast, which is a casting process that uses polyester resins, and it's very durable within the environment. It doesn't involve, foundry furnaces and molten metals and things like that, although they can be taken into bronze as well. Yeah. And when I've been fortunate enough to get public commissions, a lot of the works are first developed within a cold cast, then given to a foundry where they take another mold and then take it into cast bronze or whatever that
Are
may
you
be.
working with an armature?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So the way the sculpture is actually made is an armature, which is essentially a skeleton inside of steel. Then chicken wire is wrapped around, and then soft clay is applied and then modeled. From there, plaster molds are taken. So in this particular case, I think one, two, three, four, five, six-piece mold.
Oh wow!
That all come apart separately.
Oh.
There's a process of drawing and curing and preparing, but then the material is cast into it and then reassembled, and then the plaster broken off, and then we end up with the piece which is patinaed or colored.
So it's almost like bronze, except no bronze.
Yeah, without the heat.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. It's lovely.
Thank you.
Is there a specific, going back to imagery, is there like a specific image that you find yourself returning to time and time and time again?
Well, I've mentioned the serpent.
Yeah.
Is
Besides
there.
the serpent.
As I mentioned, I'm interested in the reconciliation of opposites, and the idea of the mystical and the relationship to being earthbound, or the real experience, the life experience. That relationship is something that comes forward quite frequently within my work. And I would say, in looking around the exhibition, the majority of the works underneath have that as the initial objective of that piece being done.
Okay. And do you, because you're multidisciplinarian, you sculpt, you're a printmaker, you're a painter,
Sculptor.
musician?
In high school.
Okay.
Weren't we all?
Yeah. Do you find certain elements of each of those processes, like, find their ways into any work that you're creating?
That's a really good question. I am often asked, which work which discipline do you favor the most?
Yeah.
And I would say all of them equally. However, drawing is the key to everything, and I associate it to an attitude of drawing, which liberates me in light of what I want to accomplish in all of the other mediums. And it was interesting, just going back to the Ontario College of Art when I was there were so many siloed camps of, conceptual work, abstraction, performance, and nobody wanted to look outside of their silo, except, of course, what I mentioned earlier. I lost my train of thought.
You're talking about drawing, liberation.
Oh, yes, thank you, yes. And what I found interesting is that the one medium that was never literally attacked is drawing. And I suspect it has to do with the fact that from the beginning of being able to express ourselves as a child, as an infant, drawing became an aspect of it. So whether it was a doodle or a resolved, time-felt execution of drawing, all of them are seen as equal accomplishments. So an attitude of drawing for me has to do with being liberated.
Yeah.
But I came to sculpture much later than drawing, painting, and printmaking.
Oh.
And I didn't think I had an aptitude for sculpture, and I think it had to do with the way it was introduced at the Ontario College of Art.
Yeah.
I just pushed away from it. But I had, when I'm drawing on a two-dimensional plane, even though I'm trying to create the illusion of of perspective and 3 dimensions, I'm interested in my sensibility of drawing of the surface, the inside, and behind. So it made sense to me that sculpture would be a logical thing to extend myself into.
Yeah.
I was introduced to sculpture, as I mentioned, a number of years after I left the Ontario College of Art. I had worked in offsetting my income in hydro construction, but I was offered an opportunity as a full-time faculty at Georgian College School of Design and Visual Arts, the Fine Art program, as a printmaking instructor. Then I was teaching drawing and then painting as well. At that time, they had a brilliant program in ceramics, and the faculty were just amazing. I was invited by a brilliant faculty there, Alex Sorochinski, who's, as I mentioned, a brilliant creative ceramic artist.
Yeah.
And he invited all of the faculty in different disciplines to come in to do plate decoration, right? And when I arrived to do that, I had a sort of a preconceived notion of what was expected. What was given to me to play around with were the thrown large plates, but they're still soft. And I started manipulating the clay as opposed to just drawing into it, although that was an aspect of it. And the feel of the clay was just really exciting, incredibly exciting to deal with this material that just seemed alive, right? Yeah. And from there, the department allowed me to continue making smaller sculptures, of which they were fired in the kilns, etc. And then I naturally wanted to push out with that and get larger, which I did. And then in 1984, a person had seen my work, was involved with a building operations in Nova Scotia, and asked if I'd be interested in submitting for a public commission there. Yeah. And I said yes. I always say yes. And I'm here. Yeah. And that was the first large public commission I had done. I had received a number of them since, one here in Toronto a couple of years ago.
Yeah, the Eglinton BIA.
Yeah, but the first piece I did was approximately 65 feet long, 30 feet high.
65 feet long.
Yes, and had a combination of fabricated steel, cast bronze, etc. So it's one of those things I was either sink or swim, and I think I treaded water okay.
You learned as you went along.
Yeah.
We actually have one of your, I guess, ceramic pieces just over there. Phoenix, I believe it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And is that like ceramics is a, because we're more familiar with the cold cast, is that like a medium that you return to from time to time, ceramics specifically?
Unfortunately, the ceramic department at the college was closed, as a lot of them were in post-secondary arts institutions. So my access to a kiln was gone, and that's when I started moving more into having work cast in cold cast. Directly from the clay.
And you mentioned public installations, which you've had a number of. Is there something specifically that draws you to want to submit to that, to want to participate, to put your work forward?
I think it's the same situation as I explained earlier. For example, in this particular piece, seeds to sow was the theme, and immediately germinate came to mind, green man came to mind, and I just felt that need to express it. Yeah. And I think it's pretty much the same.
Okay. Yeah. And do you find like that it's a unique opportunity to put your work into the public realm in a different sort of context than, say, a public gallery?
The experience of having the first public commission and all of them that have followed, to have a work where literally hundreds of people outside or wherever see the work on an ongoing basis is pretty gratifying. You know? I mean, it's gratifying having it in a space like this, but there's usually a select number of people that come in to see it because it's not out in the public realm. You have to make a point of coming in to see that, right? Yeah,
and with the public nature of the installation, do you approach the work differently than you would, say, if it was in a gallery?
There's no question that when you're doing a public work of art, your mindset is different because you know it's going in the public realm as opposed to a gallery or a private residence or wherever it might go. So yes, there is this aspect of you have to be aware of the space you're putting it in, the community that is going to be mainly viewing it,
Yeah.
and the reality of its upkeep.
Yeah. And besides the first one that you did, is there any one in particular that you, I don't know, found particularly satisfying?
There's a piece that was done for Kitchener-Waterloo, and it was a new building that was being done, and there are. It's called Pedestrian. The piece is called Pedestrian, and Diamond and Schmidt was the architectural firm that was building, that was contracted to do the building, and the figures, literally from the top of this building, which is 4 stories, are walking down the outside of the wall.
Oh, wow.
And then onto a flat area of the building, and then continues on street level.
Yeah.
So there's 7 figures in total.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a piece I feel really quite good about. Yeah.
Yeah, and did you have sort of artistic freedom to explore a concept that literally takes over a part of the building, or was that kind of a mandate that they had from the get-go?
Well, you're dealing with a jury situation. So you're usually shortlisted with a number of other artists, and then you do maquettes, small-scale models, drawings, price breakdowns, etc. And then in the second go-round, you present it. It might be 3 to 5 that have been shortlisted.
Yeah.
And then there's experts. In this particular case, the architect for Diamond Schmidt was there. The arts community for Kitchener-Waterloo were there.
Yeah.
Artists from the community, and they make a decision from that. So it's one of those situations where the work is actually decided upon based on what is being presented in light of its considerations.
Yeah. No, I think that's interesting because people, I mean, in Toronto, we're particularly fortunate to have, I think, a good wealth of public installation. And sometimes when people are walking by it, they don't really think much about it. And I think it's interesting for people here to have a better understanding of the time and the dedication that goes into it, even if your work isn't ultimately selected.
Yeah. The piece that's on Eglinton, just west of Avenue Road, Duncarron, I think, is the road. It's a figure. Holding an umbrella, which is intended to be like the canopy of the heavens, but it's an honest gesture of giving and protection. It has a blue color, but there's a chair in front where individuals can actually become part of the sculpture, and it's called Being Here.
Being Here. And I guess last good question before we see if the audience has any is for titles. Is there, I guess it's a question that artists get from time to time, how do you sort of think about titles beforehand, during, after? Are they kind of like the inception for the work?
That's a good question. I'm not quite sure how to answer that. I think all of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes words will evoke a visual intent. Yeah. Sometimes working on a piece, it'll inform the artist in light of where you're going with it. Because there is a communication that happens between the artwork and the artist. 100%. And if you dictate to this, it's going to resist. So you have to have a communication, right? Yeah. And sometimes words, sometimes phrases, titles will emerge with that.
Even activities.
And sometimes completing the work, it tells you, my name is,
That's great. Does the audience have any questions for Ted? Yes?
Yeah, it was interesting that you saw the male figure as more of a destructive form, as you said earlier. But yet a lot of your work has that male figure in it. Can you maybe tell us a little bit, like when you look around, there's, it's very prevalent in your work. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. There is a title of a sculpture here called Mirror and Metaphor, which comes from a sense of looking into myself as a male, perhaps seeing the disappointments and the celebrations of who I am, and I think that exists within everyone, and I'm interested in exploring the male identity. I am interested in the female form and the complexity and the breadth of that, but I had to question myself, the legitimacy of me interpreting the female form and how I did that, how it's done. I think it's something that all male artists need to look at themselves and ask why. The female form has been exploited through art history. So coming back to your question, I was more interested in looking into myself and trying to understand my own complexities, because I think they're shared with all men. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. Yeah.
No, I think you are.
Yeah.
I think you're very. I have a deeper appreciation
Mm-hmm.
of your work, feeling that a lot of what I'm looking at is probably a reflection of self, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe trying to, explain oneself. So
Mm-hmm.
I think you've
Yeah, there's a British sculptor that I greatly admire, Dame Elizabeth Frink, and had the incredible pleasure of visiting, being with her numerous times in her estate in the UK. But her entire direction of her work, of work, has to do with exploring the male, and the complexities of the male. And there's an aspect of her work that I just love, and it has to do with the male running to the point where he's almost falling on his face, right? And but Elizabeth Frink also did a lot work with animals, horses, and they had a very feminine quality to them that she explored with this creature. But her, I would encourage you to look up her work in light of her interest in and her exploration of the male figure. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
thank you for that.
That's a great question. Thank you. I think I saw somebody else had a question. Yes.
Yeah, I would love to know more about the addition of the paint palette and also the paintbrush.
Oh, yeah.
It just seems very like almost like intimate and like very private
Mm-hmm.
as an object.
Mm-hmm. Collage has intrigued me, and my interest in collage has to do with the fact that when an individual looks at a work that has been pieced on, it's almost like the experience and the history of what's gone here has suddenly been added to this frame of consideration, right? And it reads as a collective whole, but yet there's this sensibility that there's something else entering into the conversation. It's not just a mutual conversation, other experiences are coming in. So these inserts are intended in a way, they come to mind when I'm working and are introduced. They're not always planned. So with regard to the one with the brush, again, that's part of the path of least resistance. The history of that particular painting has to do with, I would go for walks. We live in a rural area. And what's I've always found magical is the planting of the corn in the spring and how it sprouts and how quickly it grows. And then in the autumn, there's this mass of rattling and dense plants, corn plants, right? And I've often wanted to go into them, actually go into them, but I know I would just totally get lost, maybe get consumed by the combine harvester. I have no idea, but I always wanted to do it, but I've never done it, right? So in that particular work, I wanted to introduce the corn stalks, but from a point of safety, and that is I'm going to paint it, right? And I decided to retire one of my brushes at the end of it and attach it. And again, the horizontal implies a life experience, right? The reality of what it means to be planted on this earth, right? Physically. So the brush was added because that was the way I could enter into that cornfield without actually doing it, right? Huh. And the artist palette, I've added artist palettes into a number of paintings. This one's in the movement of work, the 7 teachings of the grandparents. And this one is wisdom. So blue insinuates and suggests knowledge, but it's interested in knowledge that is acquired, which is a life experience, but also knowledge that comes from kind of an intuitive knowledge, right? I'll call it mystical, right? And that is coming from above, creating this spark between the two of full realization, right? And so that, for me, in light of interpreting it, is the wisdom of the complexity and the colors of life and the artist's palette that can create those. The emphasis is on the three primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, and which are the colors that actually mix all the others, right? So the symbolism of there has to do with the diversity and the complexity and the breadth of what it means to be alive. And one of the things that always fascinated me, and it was an experience that I got at the Ontario College of Art, is that I was in the color class and was learning what they were trying to teach me. But what really moved me once is they brought in the three primary colors of lights, and they shone them down on the floor, and where all the three met ended up in being pure light. Like it just goes to pure light, like it's magic, right? And inspirational and incredibly symbolic, right? So the three colors there, again, have to do with the white light, which predominates the main part of the canvas. So coming back to your question, the addition of the palette on there has to do with again, the symbolic inference of creation and etc.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, and then yes.
Oh, sorry. Ted, you mentioned the aspect of silos when you were referring to your experience at Bau-Xi years ago, and how one didn't tend to step from one area to another and kind of explore that. And you've now just referred to that experience too, as if in a way it kind of held you back.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how you can comment maybe on the education of artists today and how you think artists are being taught today.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is that silo element still occurring, or if artists are being taught to maybe think more holistically now than they were previously.
I think I can only speak from my own experience. I do have some insight in the fact that all of that still exists. However, the institution that I was involved with, which I've been away from now for 13 years, there was incredible appreciation and breadth of the crossover of all disciplines. And that had to do with the respect of faculty for other faculty. It's a wonderful learning experience, not only for faculty, but for the students, to see this kind of camaraderie and this opportunity of shared information and possibilities. The siloed experience that I speak of when I was at the Ontario College of Art, and I have no idea whether or not it's still like that or not. It certainly was when I was there. That, for example, there I was, interested in painting, interested in working from the figure, yet I was being told, not only from other students, but other faculty, that painting was dead, you don't work from the figure anymore, and you're wasting your time, right? So that was experienced back then. I have no idea of how things are handled right now. I've only heard good and positive responses from other young artists that have emerged. But as I say, I can only speak from my own experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And yes?
I've noticed, at least in this series, there are many birds in the paintings, and I wonder if you could speak to your relationship with them and what inspired you to bring them into the paintings.
Sorry, what?
I said I noticed, at least in this series, there are many birds.
Birds.
And I wonder if you could speak to your relationship with them and what inspired you to bring them into some of the paintings.
Okay, I'm going to use the serpent's egg as a kind of a visual reference, which is the painting over here. So the serpent is the closest thing to the ground, creature to the ground, and again, it's it's a living creature, right? That's been demonized, unfortunately, but it's a living creature, but it's closest to the ground, and that interests me, this life experience, right to the ground. But also, the idea of moving up into the mystical is usually associated with flight or birds. As I mentioned, I'm interested in the reconciliation of opposites, right? So the idea of the mystical and the life experience, earth and sky, even environmentally, right, codepend on each other. Yeah. So the birds are symbolic of this inference of moving to the mystical. Now, with regard to that painting in the serpent's egg, what I found interesting in light of how I move forward with it is what unifies them as images is they both lay eggs, right? So that's the unifying element of the serpent as well as the bird within that particular painting. The myth of the Orphic egg is there, and you may have seen photo or images of that. There's an egg with a serpent that curls around the egg, and it's symbolic in the myth that this existed before anything else. And the serpent surrounded the egg broke open, and all of existence emerged from that. But it's the aspect of the bird, the serpent, but the unifying element of the egg, which unifies the two as supportive of each other. Wow. Did I answer your question?
You did.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm glad you're here to explain this.
I tend to wander, so.
No, that's great. That's wonderful insight. Are there any other questions from the audience?
No, please go ahead. I've already asked a question.
I have a technical question regarding that sculpture. When it comes up from the mold, can you do any adjustment?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
When it comes out of the mold, can you do any adjustments?
Yes, you can. Yes. So the material is really a wonderful material. It's associated to plastic, which is not too wonderful. But when it's taken out of the mold, essentially you've got the imprint of what you initially created in soft clay. However, if I chose to, and if I wanted to add another leaf, I could literally create that out of the material itself by increasing the body of the material, the casting material, so I can actually model it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the material is flexible enough that it's soft enough that I can pour it into the molds and get the casting, but I can also modify the material so it's almost clay-like and then add it onto it. Yeah.
Okay. I had another question, but this kind of leads me. So how did you come upon this material? Like, was it introduced to you? Was it something that you helped evolve? Like, I'm curious.
It was a chance situation. So I mentioned earlier about the first commission that I was able to get out in Nova Scotia, and it was one of those things where I've never done this before, but yeah, I can do this, right? I don't know if that's arrogance or stupidity. I have no idea. However, it was one of those situations. So I had the maquette all done. The figurative component was going to be cast into bronze. It was, I think, 15, 16 feet high. So I went to the foundry, and I spoke to them about it to get a costing, etc. And they said, well, you've done this in your studio. And I said, yeah, it's in my studio. Well, we're going to send somebody out that we employ that's going to take an impression of this. So I'm not sure if you know the artist Evan Penny, brilliant Canadian artist. He worked for the foundry at that time, and he came to my studio, and he was very familiar with this process, and I was just hanging over his shoulder the whole time and watching what he was doing, how he was doing it, so that's how I was introduced to it. It was strictly by chance, and I just explored it and modified it with respect to my own means, but that's how I was introduced to it. Mm-hmm.
My other question was going to be about the serpent.
Mm-hmm.
And the only painting that I really have identified with the actual serpent is really the serpent and the egg there.
Mm-hmm.
But all your others don't have the serpent, at least none that I could really identify.
There's one back here. And essentially, you can see that the serpent is making the full circle.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So the cycle is there, and it's difficult to see, but in the light, the softer parts inside, there is a figure standing there, but also again the reconciliation of opposites, the idea of bringing night to day as equals, the equinox. Right. These are things that interested me in doing this work. The collaged element of the tree, which had brought the 4 panels together, that's a tree that I observe when I go for my walks, and I find quite inspiring. Now, the emphasis of the horizontal and vertical are extremely important to me in that work. One of the things that intrigued me when I was teaching drawing is that when I asked a student to draw from their imagination, I was very curious in light of the students that chose intuitively to work horizontally and what they created, and the students that presented or created their work vertically, right? Again, horizontal, horizon line, we're of this earth, we're planted on this earth, right? It's a real experience. Or the vertical, ascension or descent, right? So I started thinking about that quite a bit, and although it's not fully related to that particular painting, what interests me is archetypes, and how archetypes like horizontal, vertical are moved into iconography. So one of the things that intrigued me is the, I'll just use the Christian cross as a reference. So we have the vertical within the Christian cross, which could, I believe, symbolizes ascent or descent. But you cannot ignore, in light of the theology, that the life experience is not important, which is the horizontal, but less important in the theology of ascension or descent. So the life experience intersects that. What also interested me is the red cross, where they're both equal and red, and it's a symbol of when a transgression has happened. This organization goes in out of a feeling of wanting to help, which is mystical. Like, why do you want to help, right? But it's actually, again, the horizontal in a situation that has been real, right? And red is symbolic. Red is symbolic of love and affection, but it's also transgression, right? Mm-hmm. So again, that symbol becomes very poignant in light of being an archetype and then moving forward and being presented as an icon. The other thing that I'm just looking around, it doesn't exist too much in the works here. It does maybe in the far one, but what has intrigued me over the years is this kind of umbrella-like shape, this dome-like shape that comes down, let me see. Oh, it exists. It also exists in here in this particular painting, this dome-like shape, and looking at other artists' work, I've seen how it's been used, and I believe intuitively. And I was interested in deconstructing why I chose to use it intuitively, not in this particular work, but it happens over and over again. So in my considerations for this and looking at it, it came to mind that perhaps what we're talking about here is a place of sanctuary, the cave or the womb. Right? This simple shape. And in this particular case, the fire inside really emphasizes that, right? So a place of sanctuary. And it's not too difficult, particularly in the past current events, when you think of St. Peter's or St. Paul's, the cathedral, the dome, that shape, a place of sanctuary, right? And but also along that thought, in considering archetypes, the boat vessel intrigues me quite a bit, and it's practical. It's pointed at the front and in the bow and in the stern. It's flat, but it represents a point of passage. And again, if we think of it moving towards iconography, it ends up being the majority of the windows within the church, mosque, or the door. And again, the element of passage to a place of sanctuary. So what intrigues me within my work, when I allow myself to work intuitively and allow that collective information to emerge, is I like to sit back afterwards and look at what has been done and try to deconstruct it and understand what I was actually trying to say to myself. Yeah.
You know, it's so interesting listening to you talk. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to monopolize, but you know, I always am amazed where ideas come from.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you said earlier, I don't really know where they come from, but you find yourself, you know, in a moment that suddenly this idea is there,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't know how it came to you, or
Mm-hmm.
how, and you have to get it out there.
Yeah.
And one would almost speak of the divine, or that there is this, you know, energy force
Mm-hmm.
that fuels us.
Mm-hmm.
And when a thought comes to you, maybe that thought is somehow, you know, within that energy that,
Mm-hmm.
that surrounds you. I don't know how you feel about that, or whether that you feel that energy is something that also comes into the body of your work.
I think
It's a very loaded question.
yeah, it is, and I refer to it as the mystical, and the life experience, and how they merge. But again, coming back to your question about creative ideas that come forward from creative people or artists, I mean, I've always thought that artists are perfectly flawed, right? And they creative people, artists experience the world differently. They're not any better than anyone else, but they experience the world differently than I think others do. But why we need to express ourselves the way we do, I'm not sure why. This is a funny story, and it's kind of related, but it's not related. After my parents passed, my brother and I had to clean out the house, et cetera, and like most parents, they keep all the report cards, right? So there they were, and I was browsing through some of these report cards that I remember, you know, as a kid, like young, taking home, and the parent had to read it and make a comment, right? And then with the closed envelope, you took it back, right? So I was reading this one, and I think it was grade 3. It said that the teacher said as a comment, "We think there's something not quite right with Teddy," right? And my parents' comment was, "We know." Anyways, I loved it. For some reason, that came to mind as you know. I have no idea where ideas come from. You know, I think it's just we're all perfectly flawed in some way. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place to end it. Thank you, everyone, for your questions, and thank you, Ted.
Yeah. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.